The film begins in a place called Burma, which we call Myanmar nowadays. Back in 1955, there was a big fight between the Burmese military forces and a group of people called the Karen. These Karen folks were mostly poor Christian farmers. Now, let's switch scenes. We meet a guy named Rambo, who's a veteran from the Vietnam War. Yep, it's that Rambo. He's living in Burma now, trying to escape from his past full of violence. He's got a new gig, which was selling cobra snakes, and helps folks get across the water, like rivers and seas. He's trying to find some peace in his life. So, one day, Rambo had a visitor, and he was a priest named Michael. This Michael guy wanted Rambo to help him and his wife go to a place called Karen. They really wanted to lend a hand to the Karen people. They had some medicines to share and wanted to teach them about Christianity. But Rambo knew that going to Karen was super dangerous, like a mission where you might not make it back. So he said no to Michael's idea. But then Michael's wife, Sarah, showed up and talked to Rambo. She had a way of touching his heart, reminding him of someone special. She made Rambo think about the real meaning of life. Then she asked him if he had something important to protect, like a home. And just like that, Rambo remembered his own past and where he came from. In the end, Sarah's words worked their magic on Rambo. He decided to help out and send those missionary folks to Karen. It was all because of Sarah and her words that reminded him of what really matters. Now, let's switch gears and meet a tough guy named Samedi. He's in charge of the Burmese military forces, and let me tell you, he's really mean. He tells his soldiers to hurt the prisoners they capture, and it's awful because they even do terrible things to the women they catch. All right, now back to Rambo and the gang. They're on their journey, moving along. Then something surprising happens. At that time, Rambo and Sarah start getting closer. Sarah's curious about Rambo because he's always been the quiet, mysterious type. Meanwhile, Michael is busy helping the Karen folks on the boat. But things take a dark turn when night falls. Rambo's group gets stopped by a boat full of those Burmese military forces. They're up to no good, planning to rob and hurt Sarah. At that time, Michael tries to talk to them nicely, but Rambo knows these guys won't listen to reason. So he decides to take action and fight them off. Soon after, Michael and Rambo start arguing. Michael doesn't agree with Rambo's violent move, thinking it's really bad. But Rambo doesn't see any other choice, as he knows how awful those Burmese military forces can be. Then, the argument gets heated, and Rambo ends up stopping Michael forcefully. At that moment, Michael just listens, not able to say much. After a few more days of traveling, Rambo and the gang finally reach the border between the Burmese and Karen military forces. The group has to split up now. According to their plan, Rambo can only go with them on the river journey. Then, as Rambo continued his journey, he came across a boat from the Burmese military forces that was up to no good. He decided to take action and set fire to the boat, making sure there were no traces left behind. As he did this, memories of the terrible things he did during the Vietnam War flooded his mind. Meanwhile, over in the rural Karen areas, Michael and Sarah were doing what they came for. They were giving out food, medicine, and teaching kids about Christianity. But things took a horrible turn when Commander Samedi and his soldiers attacked the village. It was brutal because they killed all the people in the Karen settlement. At that time, women and some foreigners were taken captive, enduring terrible things. Also, the prisoners were treated terribly, just like pigs, and the young Karen folks who were taken were forced to join the Burmese military forces as soldiers. A few days later, Rambo had a nightmare. His Vietnam War memories were haunting him, and he felt deep regret for the lives he had taken. When he woke up that night, a pastor who was in charge of the church where Michael and Sarah worked paid him a visit. Shortly after, the priest asked Rambo for help with a special mission. This mission was from the United States government, and it was about saving Michael, Sarah, and the other missionaries. Before the priest left, he prayed for Rambo, hoping that he'd be protected and forgiven for his past mistakes. The pastor's prayers echoed in Rambo's mind as he worked on his trusty knife, the one he kept since his retirement. After a while, Rambo was all set to go with the Special Forces from the United States. The leader of this force was Commander Lewis, and he's a real talker and thinks highly of himself. On the journey, Commander Lewis kept on bragging about his war experiences. At that time, Rambo just kept quiet, steering the boat. He knew Lewis talked a lot, but didn't really do much. Among the team, there was an awesome sniper named Bambi. At that time, he had a hunch that Rambo wasn't just a regular boatman, but a soldier who had his reasons for being on this mission. Soon after, they finally reached their destination. Then, there are two rebels guiding them, sneaking into the Burmese military forces headquarters. Suddenly, at that time, two Karen youngsters became rebels. They didn't like how the Burmese military forces treated people, which was just too cruel. Rambo, who was all set to help the Special Forces, hit a roadblock. However, Commander Lewis didn't think Rambo was right for the mission. He figured Rambo was just a regular boat guy and could easily get killed. But Rambo had a different idea. He knew these Special Forces wouldn't stand a chance against the Burmese military forces. So he decided to secretly tag along behind them. After a while, they reached the area they were supposed to be in. Fear crept in as they saw the awful things the Burmese military forces had done, which was dead bodies of the Karen people they had killed. At that moment, Commander Lewis was scared too. His lips were trembling nonstop after seeing all that. The rebels with them even said that there were thousands of Burmese military troops now. Then, just when they thought about backing out, suddenly the Burmese military showed up, wanting to kill their prisoners. Because of that, Commander Lewis and his special forces couldn't figure out a way to escape from the Burmese military soldiers. But hey, guess who showed up? Rambo. With his arrows, he took out the Burmese soldiers, leaving Commander Lewis stunned. Lewis was like, "Who are you, Rambo?" Meanwhile, Bambi just smiled because he knew he was right about Rambo. Then Lewis thought about calling off the mission. But Rambo shouted out that they needed to fight for today, to protect regular folks. That got Lewis back on track. His fear vanished, and he ordered his team to keep going. Finally, they reached the Burmese military headquarters. Fortunately, rain helped them sneak in quietly since its noise covered their movements. On the other side, you could see how awful the Burmese military forces were to the Karen women living there. They were treated horribly, like uncivilized people, with the Burmese men humiliating and publicly doing the unthinkable to them. But guess what? Commander Samedi wasn't part of this awful party. Turns out he had a different taste cause he was into same-gender relationships. Then, after seeing the Burmese military forces were having a party, which was a terrible one, though, Commander Lewis and his special forces swooped in to save the captive missionaries. Meanwhile, Rambo had his own mission, which was to find Sarah, who was locked up. But just as he got close, the Samedi brothers dragged Sarah into a room for something awful. Quick as lightning, Rambo chased after them to rescue Sarah. Fortunately, he managed to save her from a terrible situation. Then Rambo headed to the spot where he was supposed to meet up with the special forces. But there was trouble because two Burmese military guys who knew about Rambo's heroic actions stopped them. Thankfully, Bambi saved the day with his sniper skills. At that time, Commander Lewis was spooked by the whole situation at the Burmese military headquarters. So, they had to leave, leaving Rambo, Sarah, and Bambi behind since they hadn't made it to the meeting point yet. Meanwhile, right in the middle of their journey, Rambo stopped to tend to Sarah's injured leg. At that time, Bambi kept watch over everything around them. On the other hand, things weren't going well for Commander Lewis and his special forces. Shortly after, he stepped on a mine and his leg got seriously hurt. It was tough for his team cause they had to carry him so he could move. After a while, Rambo realized they were being chased by Burmese troops. Then he came up with a plan, which was he used himself as bait so Bambi and Sarah could escape safely. Soon after, he tore up Sarah's clothes because he knew the enemy could track them by her scent. At first, Sarah didn't want to go along with this, fearing for Rambo's life. She even had plans to marry Rambo if Michael didn't make it through this mission. But Bambi believed Rambo could handle the situation and urged Sarah to run with him. Soon after, Rambo took off, carrying the torn clothes to draw the troops' attention. There he led them into a field with old mines from World War II. This was where his skills shone through, cause he showed his tactical know-how and fighting experience, even with just basic gear. Using a rope and the torn clothes, Rambo triggered all the mines in the field like a pro. On the flip side, Bambi and Sarah kept an eye on the situation. Then they saw the Special Forces and Commander Lewis getting caught by Commander Samedi. At that moment, Rambo wasn't about to sit back quietly. There, he snuck behind the Burmese troops and launched a surprise attack. He even managed to grab a machine gun from them. Soon after, Rambo started firing at the Burmese soldiers in front of him. This gave the captive Special Forces a chance to break free and fight back. Just then, rebel troops showed up to back him up. With their combined efforts, Rambo and the Special Forces wiped out the Burmese soldiers. At the same time, Bambi helped out too, sniping enemies from a distance. When it was all over, Commander Lewis was pretty impressed by Rambo's skills. Turns out, Rambo had more experience than Lewis thought. And as for Commander Samedi, the quiet guy who hadn't said much in the movie, he looked terrified seeing Rambo taking out his soldiers. Eventually, Rambo ended up stabbing Samedi to death. At that time, the Burmese soldiers left were stunned by the gruesome death of their commander. Then, they dropped their weapons in the end since their leader was gone. Shortly after, Rambo saved the Special Forces and Sarah, who were trapped. Then, Sarah reunited with Michael, so she didn't end up marrying Rambo after all. After the battle, Commander Lewis and his troops looked for survivors. At that time, Sarah, Michael, Bambi, and Commander Lewis spotted Rambo up on a hill. There, he had taken down Commander Samedi, standing like a true legend. Soon after, Rambo waved goodbye to Sarah, signaling that they could never be together or see each other again. The film wraps up with Rambo deciding to head back to his hometown in Arizona, USA. At that time, he wants a peaceful life as a wheat farmer, and that's how the film ends. The moral lesson from this film is if you're a retired veteran trying to find peace, selling cobra snakes, and rescuing missionaries might be a great way to pass the time.